Hello, you're watching Sky News Breakfast. Time now to take a look at the papers. And here with me going through them are the columnist and broadcaster Esther Krakue and journalist, author and former editor-in-chief of Open Democracy, Peter Geoghegan. So welcome back to both of you. We're delving inside the pages of the papers this hour. We dealt with a few of the front pages last time. Esther, you're going to kick us off with an article in The Guardian about the situation in Gaza.
Yes, the tragic humanitarian crisis in Gaza only seems to be worsening. I mean, just to contextualize, because I don't think people understood what the situation was in Gaza before the October 7th attacks. You know, about 50% of the population were at risk of starvation. 90% of the population didn't have access to clean water. And obviously, this military incursion by the IDF has only worsened the situation, particularly amongst hospitals that are desperately lacking in fuel. You know, you've had doctors saying that actually the amount of fuel that's coming in is less than half of what they need. You've seen babies on incubators that are struggling to stay alive. So, I mean, this is one of those moments that really just stay in the psyche of most people's minds because it's so tragic and it's so devastating. And obviously, the moral and military validity of this kind of action by Israel is being called into question. One of them being, how do you actually differentiate between Hamas militants and civilians? You know, if you have killed someone, how do you know they're a Hamas militant? How extensive is Israel's intelligence in that respect? And obviously, we are seeing protests. We've seen protests basically over the last few weeks, and they're only going to get louder and more vocal as we see images of dying children and women and men in Gaza. It's really tragic.
That's right. I think most people would agree, Peter, that the situation in Gaza is pretty dire. It's the question of what is done about it. And obviously, the political leaders in this country are saying that a ceasefire isn't the right approach because it will give Hamas a chance to regroup and rearm and continue attacks. Yeah,
and it does feel, though, in recent days as if there's a bit of a change. You've been listening to Andrew Mitchell, the Development Secretary, or who's in the Foreign Office these days, in Parliament this week, talking about the situation, the number of children are being killed in Gaza. You know, Emmanuel Macron has come out recently as well. It does feel Anthony Blinken, who's the Foreign Secretary in the States, has made statements.
He said too many Palestinians are being killed.
Yes, so there is, you know, I think international public opinion as gauged by political leaders is changing, actually. And I don't know how much longer Israel can go on bombing. You know, it's one of the most densely populated places in the planet. It's over 2 million people living in a tiny area. It's about 25.
London,
it's a really, really small part of the world. And the idea that you can eradicate. We had the war on terror where we failed to bomb terrorists and militants out of existence. They still exist. So I think we have a long, now 20-year record. And you saw Joe Biden basically warning the Israelis about that, the fallacy of thinking you can bomb ideas out of existence. So I do wonder in the coming days and weeks, as these images become more and more, how long that the international pressure will stay off Israel and how much it will step up.
Well, yeah, and Israel continues to argue they face an existential threat themselves and want to try to root out Hamas to protect their people. So it's an ongoing conversation, and it will be interesting to see if politicians do shift their position at all. In the meantime, though, take us, Peter, to the Financial Times, because there's an article here about David Cameron. This time last week, none of us thought we'd be speaking about David Cameron quite so much.
Lord Cameron.
Apologies, yes.
It's so strange to say it.
Yeah, Lord Cameron, as of Monday, in his new role as Foreign Secretary, and there's been a lot of scrutiny of his behaviour since being in government and now, and the focus in the FT is on China.
Yeah, well, you have to remember the last time David Cameron was really in the headlines in the UK was a couple of years ago with the Greensill scandal, which was possibly the biggest lobbying scandal we'd seen in a couple of decades in the UK, where he'd been lobbying former ministers over colleagues and friends over a company that he was working for, Lex Greensill's Greensill Capital. And there's a couple of interesting pieces. There's a piece in the FT, and there's also a double-page spread in the Times as well, delving into another aspect of David Cameron's business interests after he left office, which is relationship with China. And the FT are reporting that Cameron was trying to raise $1 billion for his private equity fund in particular from the China Investment Corporation. And similarly, in the Times, they're looking at his links with China. And one of the most important things to mention about this is just last month, it was being reported that David Cameron was being talking up a significant port development in Sri Lanka, and he was saying how it was the Sri Lankan-owned business, and actually it's a Chinese-owned business. It's completely wholly Chinese-owned, and there's huge questions to ask about what David Cameron knew about that at the time when he was making those statements. And David Cameron, unfortunately, has a history of being less than completely honest about his business interests since leaving office. And I think this is one of the aspects that it feels as if, like, how much Rishi Sunak talked about this, but David Cameron has been touting for business around the world for the best part of a decade. So there's a lot of these sort of stories, and what both the FT and the Times are doing is really trying to get deep under the skin of David Cameron's lobbying operation, particularly as regards China. And there's a lot of China hawks in the Conservative Party, people like Ian Duncan Smith and others, who will be very deeply uncomfortable about this and are already making noises and saying that he was a wrong appointment because of it.
Well, yes, and I'm just scanning the article now to see if David Cameron has got any right of reply in here. I can't see it at the moment, so no doubt he'd have something to say.
Yeah, he's
I've done nothing wrong.
Hey, that's basically his. He said if you look at the end of the FT piece on Monday, Cameron confirmed he was resigning from, quote, all of the businesses I've been helping and all the things I've been doing. He did not elaborate on what they are.
Yeah. Okay. Take us on, though, to another story, and this is on the front of the Mirror, Esther, and this is a warning about people struggling with the cost of living this winter. But who's it come from?
Yes, it's come from Chris O'Shea, who's the chief executive of Centrica. We know that's the parent company of British Gas and Centrica Hive, and every winter we have, obviously stories about the NHS struggling, people struggling to pay energy bills, but it's particularly acute this winter, given Britain's acutely bad energy price problem. I mean, we've had the highest, some of the highest energy prices in the developed world since about 2010. At some point, it was almost 50% more than in the US, and obviously the implications of that for businesses, because energy happens to be one of the highest costs for businesses alongside staff. So, people are really struggling, obviously, with energy bills. And in the King's speech, he mentioned, obviously, the Tories have greenlit oil and gas licenses in the North Sea to try and stabilise Britain's energy. But it is not a problem that's going away anytime soon. I mean, I think other countries, obviously, like France, like Norway, have been hit by rising energy prices, but they have a different sort of energy mix. So the French have had the convenience of relying on nuclear energy, which is more efficient and obviously a bit more reliable, but Britain doesn't have that. If we'd actually greenlit a nuclear power plant over a decade ago, they would be up and active now, but we know that that's not something that the Lib Dems allowed to happen at the time. So, people are worried, people are choosing literally between heating and eating, and it's only going to get worse. And it's kind of why the Tories are touting, obviously, inflation has come down, they're trying to cut taxes, particularly for businesses that are struggling. So we'll see how they handle this. But
inflation's come down, but prices are still rising.
Exactly, but this is the problem. And so, the Tories have a really big challenge on their hands, and I don't think this is a problem that's going away anytime soon.
Okay. We were going to talk about woolly mammoths. I'm sad to say we haven't got time, but you're back for another hour. We will definitely do woolly mammoths on the front of the Star in the next hour. But for the moment, both, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.